صلوا على محمد وآل محمد. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. يا أيها المزمل قم الليل إلا قليلا نصفه أو انقص منه قليلا أو زد عليه ورتل القرآن ترتيلا. إنا سنلقي عليك قولا ثقيلا إن ناشئة الليل هي أشد وطئا وأقوم قيلا. إن لك في النهار سبحا طويلا واذكر اسم ربك وتبتل إليه تبتيلا. رب المشرق والمغرب لا إله إلا هو فاتخذه وكيلا. واصبر على ما يقولون واجرهم أجرا جميلا. وذرني والمكذبين أولي النعمة ومهلهم قليلا إن لدينا أنكالا وجحيما. وطعاما ذا غصة وعذابا أليما. يوم ترجف الأرض والجبال وكانت الجبال كثيبا مهيلا. إنا أرسلنا إليكم رسولا شاهدا عليكم كما أرسلنا إلى فرعون رسولا فعصى فرعون الرسول فأخذناه أخذا وبيلا صدق الله العلي العظيم. إلى أرواح المؤمنين والمؤمنات ومن مات على الهدى والإيمان, especially those who have passed away in Gaza, and for marhum Sayyid Asad Ja'fari, let us all please recite Surah Al-Fatiha مسبوقة بالصلاة على محمد وآل محمد. صلوا على محمد وآل محمد. Thank you all for joining us tonight. Tonight will be our last topic for the series. Inshallah, next week we'll be starting a new topic. We'll be sending out the new series, inshallah, by the end of this week, inshallah. Let us all please welcome Samahat Sheikh Murtaza Bachoo with 3 of your ladust of salawat ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad.
أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الحمد لله رب العالمين. الحمد لله الذي لا يبلغ مدحته القائلون ولا يحصي نعماءه العادون ولا يؤدي حقه المجتهدون. ثم الصلاة والسلام على أشرف الأنبياء والمرسلين سيدنا وحبيب قلوبنا وطبيب نفوسنا أبي القاسم المصطفى محمد اللهم صل وعلى أهل بيته الطيبين الطاهرين. أما بعد، السلام عليكم جميعا ورحمة الله وبركاته. Inshallah, this will be our last session on women's rights in Islam. And the topic that we want to look at today is women's issues in contemporary fiqh. There are a number of ahkam that pertain to women that are debated in fiqh, that are debated by the scholars of fiqh. And they are under discussion not only in our fiqh, but you find that these questions are also under discussion in our society, meaning that the men and women in the society, they ask questions about these ahkam of Islam. And primarily they ask whether there can be any change in these ahkam of Islam, or what is the wisdom behind some of these rulings that pertain to women in the teachings of Islam. I want to start this evening by just giving you an overview of what are some of the areas where we are discussing some of these ahkam. Obviously, this evening, we are not going to be able to discuss all of these areas. However, you will find that some will ask about the ahkam that pertain to the bulugh of girls and the bulugh of a young lady. When does a young lady become baligha? Is it at the age of 9 lunar years? Or is that too young for her to become baligha, to have the responsibility of the obligations of Islam? Perhaps it is with the first cycle, or perhaps at the age of 12 or at the age of 13. That's one area of discussion. Another area of discussion you find in the community is the right of a young lady to get married and whether she needs the consent of her father or she doesn't need the consent of her father. A young lady who is Rashidah, who is intellectually mature, does she need the consent of her father? Does she not need the consent of her father? The other areas are the rights of women within marriage, the rights of a mother in raising the child and having guardianship or custody of the child. To what extent does she have a right? The right of talaq for a woman. Can a woman initiate talaq if she is unable to live with her husband? Then an area that we are going to look at today is the distribution of inheritance between men and women, between sons and daughters. As you know, in the teachings of Islam, a son will get twice the inheritance of a daughter. The question that arises is that given the changes that we are seeing in our society, given that women are now contributing to the financial needs of the family, shouldn't now it be that the women, the daughters, should get the same inheritance as the sons? Okay? Another area is the testimony of women. And finally, the participation of women in society, the role of women in society, and the positions of leadership, and whether women can undertake positions of leadership or not. Now, this evening, I want to divide the discussion into two parts. The first part is going to be a very general discussion, and the second part is going to be a specific discussion. The first question that we are going to ask tonight is that, is it possible to have changes within Islamic law? Because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He says in the Quran, الْيَوْمَ أَكْمَلْتُ لَكُمْ دِينَكُمْ. Today I have perfected your religion for you. وَأَتْمَمْتُ عَلَيْكُمْ نِعْمَتِي. And I have completed my blessing for you. Meaning this package of Islam, the religion of Islam that was supposed to be offered to you, has now been completed. From this day forward, there is no addition. There is no subtraction. There is no changes coming in this package. That's what the Quran says. In the hadith, we are told a number of ahadith that tell us one point. They tell us, Halalu Muhammad halalun ila yawmil qiyamah. What the Prophet has made permissible, that is going to remain permissible until the day of judgment. Wa haramuhu haramun ila yawmil qiyamah. What he has made haram is now going to remain haram until the day of judgment. There are no changes within it. So can there be changes within Islamic law? The second question for this evening is going to be a specific question. And it pertains to the ahkam of women. And can there be changes to the ahkam of women in light of the changes that we're seeing in society? Yeah? We're seeing that the values of society are changing. Over the last 3 weeks, we spoke about how the values pertaining to women have changed in the 20th century. But one thing we all also appreciate is that women are also changing. And what I mean by that is that the state of women, the condition of women is also changing. Women are now entering education. Yes? They are entering higher education. They are getting bachelors and masters and PhDs. They are then entering the workforce, and they are working. They are becoming aware of society. They are aware of the changes which are happening in society. They are contributing to the family. They are financially contributing to the family. The question is, as the role of women changes in society, should the ahkam of Islam also change or not? So those are the two questions we want to look at today. Now we start with the first question. There is this book by Shaheed Murtaza Mutahari. It was a series of lectures that he gave. It was later turned into a book, and it's called Islam va niyazhay zaman. Islam and the needs of the time. Islam and the demands of a time. And he poses a very interesting and philosophical question. He says, what is the relationship between deen, religion, and society? And how can deen always be relevant to our society? How can deen always provide answers to the needs of our society? Now, why does he pose this question? He poses this question because in our understanding, the religion is something complete. It is final. It is firm. It is static. It does not change. Whereas when you look at society, almost everything in society is changing. Society is constantly in the state of flux. It is in the state of progress or in the state of change. Technology is changing. The manner in which we live in our cities is changing. Economic structures are changing. Family structures are changing. The question fundamentally is how can something which is constant, which is firm, give you answers and be relevant to something that is constantly in the state of change? It's a very profound question. Philosophically, a very profound question. In any case, Shaykh Mutahari says that the laws of Islam are of two types. There are laws which are thabit. Thabit meaning they will not change ila yawm al-qiyamah. Yes. For example, Salatul Fajr will remain Salatul Fajr. It will be 2 rak'ah ila yawm al-qiyamah. That's not about to change. But there are some ahkam of Islam which are mutaghayyir. Mutaghayyir meaning they can change. It is possible that as time changes, as the needs of the society change, these laws of Islam may also change as well. And we have examples from the early history of Islam. I'll give you a couple of simple examples. For example, we have in hadith of the sixth Imam, Imam al-Sadiq alayhi afdalus salati was salam. During the time of the Holy Prophet, when a person went for Hajj and he slaughtered an animal, the Prophet said the animal needs to be distributed within 3 days. Do not keep it more than 3 days. Yet when we come to the time of the sixth Holy Imam, the Imam says it is okay. You don't have to distribute it right away. You can distribute it later on as well. And the Imam explains, he says, look, at the time of the Holy Prophet, people were in need of that meat. The Prophet did not want the people to hold on to it. But today, the status, the economic status of the Muslims is different. There is no urgent need for people to eat this meat. So you can even distribute it after 3 days. You see, the maslahah has changed. The ruling has also changed as well. A second example. This example Shaykh Mutahari gives in his book. He says that Amir al-Mu'mineen, when he became a bit old, he didn't used to dye his beard. He would leave it white, for example, right? Now we have examples where the Imams used to dye their beard, all right? And that's okay to do that. For example, you know that when one of the people met Imam Hussein in one of the manazil towards Karbala, he said, I saw his beard it was as dark as the wings of a crow. Like it was very dark. Huh? And I asked the Imam, and the Imam said, no, this, we have dyed our beard. Okay. But Amir al-Mu'mineen, according to this narration, at some point did not used to dye his beard. Somebody came and criticized him and said, in the time of the Holy Prophet, the Prophet of Allah used to tell us that you should dye your beard. And the Imam said, during the time of the Holy Prophet, the Muslims were few in number. Whenever we would go up against the non-Muslims, some of us were elderly. So when we were few in number, some of us are elderly, the non-Muslims, when they look at us as a weak group. The Prophet told us to dye our beard so that we would look young and strong. But that maslahah is no longer here today. Okay? So, there are some ahkam of Islam which are thabit, and there are some ahkam of Islam which are mutaghayyir. They will change. The fundamental question is, which ahkam are thabit and which ahkam are mutaghayyir? And what is the mechanism by which a ruling of Islam can change? A ruling of Islam cannot change by my whims. A ruling of Islam cannot change because that is what is comfortable and what is convenient for society. But the ruling of Islam must change to allow for the growth of the society. Sheikh Mutahari gives a beautiful example. He says that when a child is of 2 years of age, you make certain clothes for them. But when the child grows up and they become 4 years of age, the same clothes will not fit on that person. So now, I don't want to go into the details of it tonight because it's an academic discussion and it requires a level of expertise. But I want to give you one example. So if you are with me, that you will notice that when the subject of the ruling changes, the ruling that is predicated of it is also going to change. If the mawdu' changes, the hukam is also going to change. Okay? A simple example. In the time of the Holy Prophet, chess was known as a tool of gambling. Yes? And the Prophet of Allah said, Shatranj, chess, is haram because it is generally known as a tool of gambling. Because we have a principle in our fiqh that if something is a tool of gambling, even if you don't wager on it, just playing with the tool of gambling is haram. So a deck of 52 cards, if a person wants to play poker with it, even if they're not even putting a penny down, playing with that deck of 52 cards, poker is haram. Okay. Now this is the ruling up until the 20th century. Yeah? But in the 20th century, some scholars, they say, that what if chess as a subject has changed? The chess that used to be known, ma'ruf, that it is a tool of gambling, is now no longer seen as a tool of gambling. Mathalan, it is seen as a tool of intellectual engagement. Then why should it be haram? So for example, Imam Khomeini, rahmatullahi ta'ala alayh, has a fatwa. He says that if in your understanding chess has ceased to be generally a tool of gambling, then it is permissible to play chess. Even Sayyid Sistani's fatwa is an interesting fatwa on this issue. He says, because chess is still a tool of gambling in some segments of the society or some segments of the world, then it is haram to play chess. So as the subject changes, the ruling is also going to change. Now, one thing that you will notice is that it's not a new ruling. These rulings were always there in Islam. But when a subject changed, a different ruling of Islam, which was always a part of Islam, now applies to that subject instead of the previous ruling. Okay? That brings us now to the laws pertaining to women. And the question that we asked is whether the laws pertaining to women can change in Islam or they are going to remain static in Islam. We say that the state of women today is different from the state of women 3 centuries ago, 5 centuries ago, 10 centuries ago. Today you find women are a part of academia. Women are in universities. They are aware of what is happening in the society. And they are also contributing to the society. In fact, if you look at it, many of the volunteers in a community nowadays are going to be women. The teachers in the community are now going to be women. Okay? And the question we want to ask is, now that this has changed, can the laws change with it as well? Now, before we get into this discussion, I want to give one word of caution, and please remember this word of caution. This conversation that we're having tonight is an academic conversation. This is not a conversation about the fiqh itself. I'm not trying to explain some of the rulings of fiqh over here. We are just trying to understand how is fiqh derived. Is there a possibility for us to have a dynamic fiqh, a fiqh that is able to answer the needs of space and time? Okay? And we're trying to understand, do maraji of taqleed today, in the hawzas in Qum and the hawzas in Najaf, do they have these discussions or they don't have these discussions? But please do not go home today and say that Sheikh Murtaza said that women can become maraji of taqleed. We're going to discuss it. Right? But don't be taking these rulings and saying this is the fiqhi ruling. We're just having an academic discussion about some of these issues. Now, there are laws which obviously about women can change. But we should also not have the expectation that all of the laws of Islam can change. We should be very clear about one issue over here, that the laws of Islam are not going to reflect Western, liberal, modern values. Islam has its own set of values. Islam did not come to follow a set of values. Islam came to change the set of values that people have in society. The values of society you find are sometimes going to change. You find in the 20th century, the values about women changed. In the 20s and 30s, they had one set of values. In the 50s and 60s, another set of values. In the 90s and the early 21st century, another set of value. The laws of Islam are not going to change. Every time the values of society start to change. In fact, Islam is our standard. And any time you come across values in the society, we need to compare those values to Islam. And not the other way around. Right? We shouldn't be taking, for example, the values of society and saying, does Islam conform to this? Or Islam does not conform to this? How do we make Islam conform to the liberal Western values of today? That's not going to happen. Al-Islamu ya'lu wa la yu'la alayh. Islam supersedes, and nothing is going to supersede Islam. Okay? Islam has its own set of values. It's not every time that the laws of Islam have to change. Sometimes we have to change. Our values have to change, right? A Muslim is called a Muslim for what reason? A Muslim is called a Muslim because he submits to the truth. He doesn't make the truth submit to him, okay? So we look at one example right now, is the issue of the inheritance of women. Right? One of the questions that is sometimes asked in society is that given that women are now equally contributing to the family, sometimes perhaps a woman is contributing more than a man to the family, financially speaking, then shouldn't the inheritance of women be the same as the inheritance of men? And I want to make 2 points about this. The first point about it is that when it comes to the inheritance of women, we have a nas in the Quran. Nas means explicit text. Nas means the text is not ambiguous. It's not open to interpretation. Okay? It is very, very explicit. Allah says in the Quran, لِلذَّكَرِ مِثْلُ حَظِّ الْأُنْثَيَيْنِ. For men is like the portion of 2 women. There's no ambiguity here. It's not equal. It's not half. It's not 1/3. It is twice the portion of women. Wherever you have nas in the Quran, both Sunni and Shia scholars are unanimous that you cannot do ijtihad in the face of nas. Once you have a clear ruling, you have no longer the right to exercise your own opinion and your own judgment. When you do that, they say this is ijtihad dar barabar nas, dar muqabil nas. You are now exercising your personal opinion in front of a clear text of the Quran. Shia do not accept it, Sunnah do not accept it either. The second point I want to make is that the issue of inheritance cannot be treated in isolation. This is the point I want to drive now. Okay? The issue of inheritance is a part of the general financial and social structure of Islam. It is intricately connected to the other ahkam of Islam. Let me give you an example. Let's say you work for a business. Now, this example is my own example. It will work to some extent, it may not work to some extent. And you want to give a raise to one person in the business. That decision cannot be taken in isolation, correct? You have a certain budget. If you choose to give the raise to one person, then what do you have to do? You have to decrease from another person. If you decrease from another person, then what do you have to do? You also have to decrease what? Their roles and their responsibilities. If you decrease their roles and their responsibilities, somebody's got to do it. You have to now increase what? Somebody else's roles and responsibilities. There is a domino effect. Every action is going to have consequences. You can never make a decision in isolation. Should we decide that we want the inheritance of men and women to be the same, it also has a domino effect. This means now in Islam, the roles and responsibilities of men and women have to be the same. The moment you make the inheritance the same, now, just as it is wajib for men to go and provide the nafaqah of the family, what do you also have to do? Wajib, an obligation for women to go and provide. It's one thing to choose that I want to go. That's fine. I want to provide. That's fine. But once you make it equal, the obligation comes now. You have to go. Well, I have a child. Oh, but you have to go. But I'm expecting a child. No, but that's it. You have to go. That's what it necessitates, isn't it? All the roles and responsibilities between men and women have to become the same. Islam does not agree with that. Islam does not agree with this liberal Western understanding of roles and responsibilities. But having said that, there are certain laws which can change. Okay? And we recognized before that the subject is changing. The state of women today is different from the state of women 10 centuries ago. Okay? This week somebody called me, and the question they had was, what is the name of the mother of the fourth Imam? It's a very interesting question. Sallu ala Muhammadin wa ali Muhammad. I'm trying to point out that women did not used to have a very public role in the past. Today, women have a public role. So when you go in the books of Tariq and history, you find there are 8 different names given for the mother of Imam as-Sajjad. Sheher Banu, Sheher Banuye, Banu, Shahzanan, Maria or Maryam, 3 other names. In the Ahl Sunnah, their books of Tariq, there are 2 names given. In the Shia, there are about 6 or 7 different names. Do you wonder why? Like, why wouldn't the writer of history know the name of the mother of the 4th Imam, Sayyidul Sajidin, Zainul Abidin? This is because the names of the women were not public. Even the names were not public, let alone the presence of a woman being public. The writer of Tariq and Sirah being a man, you should not expect from him to know what is in the family and remains in the family. Now, based on that, they developed an understanding that perhaps according to Islam, women have to stay home. Right? And we discussed this a little bit last week. So for example, even you find a hadith are now interpreted in that light. We have a hadith that states that the salat of a woman inside her house is better than the salat of a woman in the masjid. It's a hadith. Mu'tabar. Authentic. Okay. So then we say, no, she should stay at home. In the month of Ramadan, if you remember, we looked at the ahadith when it came to the intellect of women. Yeah? And what Imam Ali alayhi salam has said about the intellect of women. And therefore, should women undertake positions of, let's say, directing something? Of principalship, masalan? Or they shouldn't? So these ahadith we have. There are more ahadith like that. So one of the things that you find that is beautiful in the Shia madhab is that the door of ijtihad has been left open. And we believe that ijtihad must always happen in every era. And I and you have the responsibility of doing taqleed of a living marja. In the Ahl Sunnah, the door of ijtihad has been on issues that were there in the past, the door has been closed. There are 4 madhabs. There are 4 maraj of taqleed. Right? Hanbali, Maliki, Shafi'i, and Hanafi. Right? And the understanding amongst them is that these who were closer to the era of revelation, their understanding of the nusus, their understanding of Quran and Hadith will always be better than those who are in the present day and age. And the understanding of the Shia is, no. That was their understanding. Every era, we will revisit it. And we will try to understand it once again. And maybe our understanding of a hadith is going to be different from their understanding. And accordingly, the law will change. Let me read for you something from Sayyid Sistani's website. And I'm going to read for you now 2 quotes, one in Arabic and one in Farsi. So you are going to have to be patient with me. But it is valuable for you, inshallah. It will give you a little bit of an insight into what is happening behind the curtain. What is happening behind the curtain. As-Su'al, sistani.org. هل تؤيدون صلاة المرأة جماعة في المسجد خلف الرجال? Do you support women to pray salat in the masjid behind men? إذا كان ذلك مع الاحتفاظ بحشمتها والتزامها حجابها. As long as she is respectful, she is modest, and she also observes her hijab. Now the answer could have been yes or no, yeah? But the answer came with an explanation. This explanation is what is valuable for us. يستحب, it is mustahab. اشتراك المرأة, that a woman should participate. في جماعة المسلمين في المسجد, in the congregation of the believers in the masjid. Why? Okay. وقد جرت على ذلك سيرة المسلمات في عصر النبي صلى الله عليه وآله. And the seerah of the Muslim women was according to this during the time of the Holy Prophet, may peace be upon him. فَفِي الْمَرْوِيِّ فِي الصَّحِيحِ, in a narration that has been narrated, and that narration is sahih, عن أمير المؤمنين عليه السلام, the first Imam says, كُنَّ النِّسَاءِ يُصَلِّينَ مَعَ النَّبِي. The women used to say salat with whom? The Holy Prophet. And then يُؤْمَرْنَ أَنْ لَا يُرْفَعْنَ رُؤُوسَهُنَّ قَبْلَ الرِّجَالِ. And they were also told that since you are praying behind the men, do not raise your heads from sujood before the men have raised their heads from sujood. Why? Because you shouldn't be looking at the backs of men. Okay? Then it continues, نعم. ورد في بعض النصوص المعتبرة. It has also come to us in certain trusted narrations أن صلاة المرأة في بيتها, that the prayer of a woman in her house أفضل من صلاتها في المسجد, is better than her prayer in the masjid. Sayyid, what is your interpretation of this hadith? In the past, they would say she should remain in her home. That is better for her. Sayyid Sistani, what is your ijtihad? والذي استظهرناه بملاحظة مجموعة تلك النصوص, and what we have come to understand, not by looking at one hadith, but by looking at the majmu'ah, the collection of all the ahadith, is what? وأن الأفضل للمرأة أن تختار للصلاة. It is better for a woman to choose a place for prayer where she is away from the men. She is not visible to the men. She is not seen by the men. Okay? فإن تهيأ لها مثل هذا المكان, if such a place is prepared for her, فلا تفضل الصلاة في البيت على الصلاة في المسجد حينئذ, then the prayer in the house is not better for her than the prayer in the masjid. One more thing I want to share with you, and I just want us to recognize that there's a recognition in the ijtihad amongst our scholars that some of the states of women are not essential to them. If this is how women were in the past, it doesn't mean that women always will be like that. It doesn't mean that women also have to be like that right now. And if the states of women change, then the rulings can change as well. Now, this book is Zan در آینه جلال و جمال, Woman in the reflection of glory and beauty. This book is by Ayatollah Javadi Amuli. And he has a section under the marja'iyya of women. Can women become maraji of taqleed, or women cannot become maraji of taqleed? Okay? The reason why I want to quote this for you is because, again, it has some very important subtle points. Okay? So I'll ask for your patience. I'm going to be reading it in Farsi. I'm going to be translating it into English. Just be a little bit patient with me. بِالصَّلَاةِ عَلَى مُحَمَّدٍ وَآلِ مُحَمَّدٍ. He says, ممکن است, it's possible, لزوم ارتیاز و تمرین زنان برای تعدیل عواطف بیشتر از مردان باشد. Now it's possible that women may have to be more disciplined. They have to put more effort in controlling their emotions than men have to put in controlling their emotions. لیکن, however, Ayatollah Javadi, اگر در پرتو تمرین, on account of being disciplined and practicing, شرایط مساوی پدید آید, similar conditions come into place. The way a man is able to exercise his judgment, a woman is also able to exercise her judgment. The way a man controls his emotions, a woman also controls her emotions. Okay. دلیلی بر محرومیت زنان از سمت‌های یاد شده وجود ندارد. We have no evidence. We have no rational evidence. We have no Quranic evidence. We have no hadithi evidence to say that women cannot undertake some of the positions we just spoke about. Which positions? He's talking about what? He also mentions qadawa, being a judge. He also mentions other leadership positions. Now hold your thoughts. He's going to come to some further explanations, okay? به ویژه که مرجعیت سمت اجرایی است because مرجعیه also has an administrative aspect to it. اما listen to this now. پشتوانه مرجعیت و ریشه و بهای آن but the basis of مرجعیت, the grounding for مرجعیت, the foundation, like what makes a marja? Is it being a man? What makes a marja? Okay. به فقاهت و اجتهاد و عدالت هست. It is by having فقاهة, a deep understanding of the religion. Number 2, اجتهاد, the ability to derive Islamic law. Number 3, عدالة, having taqwa. Okay. و در این امور, and in these issues, اجتهاد, فقاهت and عدالت, ذکورت و انوثت شرط نیست. Being a man or a woman is not a condition. A man can become a faqih. A woman can become a faqihah. Okay. Atla Javadi. Shayad, maybe. Zani dar اوج فقاهت و عدالت. A woman would reach the peak of فقاهت and عدالت, of understanding the religion. قرار گیرد و همچون مرحوم صاحب جواهر, and become like whom? صاحب جواهر. Jawahir al-Kalam is an important book of fiqh. It is voluminous. We have no example like it in the Shia collection of fiqh, right? The way Bihar is voluminous and it has no second, Jawahir is similarly voluminous. It has no second to it. Okay? In Dars Kharij, they will teach Jawahir. Okay? The one who wrote it, Sahib Jawahir, was Sheikh Ansari, Sheikh Murtaza Ansari. تحول عظیم فقه ایجاد نموده. A woman can bring about a great revolution in our understanding of the fiqh. بتواند شاگردانی تربیت کند که آنها مرجع تقلید شوند. She may be able to train students, and those students would become what? مرجع of تقلید. و این هیچ محظوری ندارد. There is no restriction to this. اما خودش به سبب محظور حشنا. He explains that herself, because she may have to be with men, she may have to spend a lot of time with men, she may have to spend, for example, time with leaders, time with, for example, some of the rulers, whatever it is, of the community and the society, she may not undertake the same responsibility. Okay? And then later he says that و به ویژه اگر در محدوده جامع زنان باشد, if it is within the limitation of women, یا مرجعیت زنان بر عهده بگیرد, or she takes the مرجعیه of what? Of women in particular, همانطور که میتواند امام جماعت زنان, امامت جماعت زنان باشد. The same way that she can become the imam of the jama'ah for women, his opinion anyways, is that she could also become a marja for the women as well. Now, like I said, it's an academic discussion. And what is important over here is to recognize that these conversations are happening within the Hawza of Ilmiya. What is important also is to recognize that there are mechanisms by which our fiqh may change. It's also important to recognize that these mechanisms have also been defined. One of the important mechanisms is when the subject changes, sometimes the ruling is also going to change. But we should also not forget that it is not always the case that the rulings are going to change. Islam has its set of values, and these rulings are going to change based on the Islamic set of values and not the set of values set for us by modern society, by liberal society, or even by secular society. Sallu ala Muhammadin wa ali Muhammad. I want to dedicate the lecture tonight first and foremost to the children of Gaza, to the innocence of the children of Gaza, and to the Mazlumiyah of the children of Gaza. But 3,000 to 4,000 of the people killed in Gaza have been children. Even many of those who are injured have been children. And these children carry a very heavy burden on their shoulders. The children of Gaza have been able to do something that journalists have not been able to do, that political leaders have not been able to do, that soldiers have not been able to do, that people online have not been able to do. The children of Gaza have, for once and for all, they have removed the veil, the hijab of hypocrisy from the face of Western leaders. That none of them from this day forth have a right to speak to us about human rights, to speak to anybody about ethics or morality, to speak to anybody about international order and a rules-based order of the world. It was always clear for some that they had double standards, but it took the sacrifice of the children of Gaza to make this obvious to each and every person who has a conscience, each and every person who has a heart that is beating. So tonight I want to dedicate this to the children of Gaza and also to Marhum Sayyid Asad Ja'fari, who was not just a scholar, he was a teacher, he was a mentor, he was a fatherly figure to many youth. And I know that because I personally saw the way he would work with the youth. There were many summer camps in Toronto where we spent time together. We played with the youth together. We had sessions with the youth together. And year after year, I would see those youth growing. And today they have become strong in their iman. They have become strong in their akhlaq. And one of the main reasons was the presence of Sayyid Asad Ja'fari. Not only a fatherly figure, but he was a mujahid of Islam, and a true mujahid in every sense of the word, right? He spoke the truth and never feared. He spoke truth to power. He spoke the truth openly. He spoke about the issue of Palestine. He never backed down. He spoke against Zionism. That was his last dua. And he never backed down from it. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala accept all of his good deeds and forgive any of his lapses. And may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala grant him a high status in the vicinity of the Ahlul Bayt. And may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala grant him the highest status and daraja in Jannah. Let us pray for our brothers and sisters in Gaza and for those who are protecting our brothers and sisters in Gaza. For Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to grant them protection and to grant them victory. And for Allah to grant them victory over their enemies. And for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala make firm their determination. And for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to help them and guide them in this struggle. Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. Allahumma salli ala Muhammadin wa ali Muhammad. Allahumma adkhil ala ahli al-qubur as-surur. Allahumma aghni kull faqir. اللهم اشبع كل جائع اللهم اكسو كل عريان اللهم اقض دين كل مدين اللهم فرج عن كل مكروب اللهم رد كل غريب اللهم فك كل أسير اللهم اصلح كل فاسد من أمور المسلمين اللهم اشفي كل مريض اللهم سد فقرنا بغناك اللهم غير سوء حالنا بحسن حالك اللهم اقض عنا الدين وأغننا من الفقر إنك على كل شيء قدير الله
Ahsantum. Inshallah, we'll be reciting Surah Yasin for the Shuhada of Gaza and for Marhum Sayyid Asad Ja'fari, inshallah. Sallu ala Muhammadin wa ali Muhammad.
أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. ياسين والقرآن الحكيم إنك لمن المرسلين على صراط مستقيم. تنزيل العزيز الرحيم لتنذر قوما ما أنذر آباؤهم فهم غافلون. لقد حق القول على أكثرهم فهم لا يؤمنون. إنا جعلنا في أعناقهم أغلالا فهي إلى الأذقان فهم مقمحون. وجعلنا من بين أيديهم سدا ومن خلفهم سدا فأغشيناهم فهم لا يبصرون. وسواء عليهم أنذرتهم أم لم تنذرهم لا يؤمنون. إنما تنذر من اتبع الذكر وخشي الرحمن بالغيب فبشره بمغفرة وأجر كريم. إنا نحن نحيي الموتى ونكتب ما قدموا وآثارهم وكل شيء أحصيناه في إمام مبين. واضرب لهم مثلا أصحاب القرية إذ جاءها المرسلون إذ أرسلنا إليهم 2 فكذبوهما فعززنا بثالث فقالوا إنا إليكم مرسلون. قالوا ما أنتم إلا بشر مثلنا وما أنزل الرحمن من شيء إن أنتم إلا تكذبون. قالوا ربنا يعلم إنا إليكم لمرسلون وما علينا إلا البلاغ المبين. قالوا إنا تطيرنا بكم لئن لم تنتهوا لنرجمنكم وليمسنكم منا عذاب أليم. قالوا طائركم معكم أئن ذكرتم بل أنتم قوم مسرفون. وجاء من أقصى المدينة رجل يسعى قال يا قوم اتبعوا المرسلين اتبعوا من لا يسألكم أجرا وهم مهتدون. وما لي لا أعبد الذي فطرني وإليه ترجعون. أأتخذ من دونه آلهة إن يردني الرحمن بضر لا تغن عني شفاعتهم شيئا ولا ينقذون. إني إذا لفي ضلال مبين. إني آمنت بربكم فاسمعون. قيل ادخل الجنة قال يا ليت قومي يعلمون بما غفر لي ربي وجعلني من المكرمين. وما أنزلنا على قومه من بعده من جند من السماء وما كنا منزلين إن كانت إلا صيحة واحدة فإذا هم خامدون يا حسرة على العباد ما يأتيهم من رسول إلا كانوا به يستهزئون ألم يروا كم أهلكنا قبلهم من القرون أنهم إليهم لا يرجعون وإن كل لما جميع لدينا محضرون وآية لهم الأرض الميتة أحييناها وأخرجنا منها حبا فمنه يأكلون وجعلنا فيها جنات من نخيل وأعناب وفجرنا فيها من العيون ليأكلوا من ثمره وما عملته أيديهم أفلا يشكرون سبحان الذي خلق الأزواج كلها مما تنبت الأرض ومن أنفسهم ومما لا يعلمون وآية لهم الليل نسلخ منه النهار فإذا هم مظلمون والشمس تجري لمستقر لها ذلك تقدير العزيز العليم والقمر قدرناه منازل حتى عاد كالعرجون القديم لا الشمس ينبغي لها أن تدرك القمر ولا الليل سابق النهار وكل في فلك يسبحون وآية لهم أنا حملنا ذريتهم في الفلك المشحون وخلقنا لهم من مثله ما يركبون وإن نشأ نغرقهم فلا صريخ لهم ولا هم ينقذون إلا رحمة منا ومتاعا إلى حين وإذا قيل لهم اتقوا ما بين أيديكم وما خلفكم لعلكم ترحمون وما تأتيهم من آية من آيات ربهم إلا كانوا عنها معرضين وإذا قيل لهم أنفقوا مما رزقكم الله قال الذين كفروا للذين آمنوا أنطعم من لو يشاء الله أطعمه إن أنتم إلا في ضلال مبين ويقولون متى هذا الوعد إن كنتم صادقين ما ينظرون إلا صيحة واحدة تأخذهم وهم يخصمون فلا يستطيعون توصية ولا إلى أهلهم يرجعون ونفخ في الصور فإذا هم من الأجداث إلى ربهم ينسلون قالوا يا ويلنا من بعثنا من مرقدنا هذا ما وعد الرحمن وصدق المرسلون إن كانت إلا صيحة واحدة فإذا هم جميع لدينا محضرون فاليوم لا تظلم نفس شيئا ولا تجزون إلا ما كنتم تعملون إن أصحاب الجنة اليوم في شغل فاكهون هم وأزواجهم في ظلال على الأرائك متكئون لهم فيها فاكهة ولهم ما يدعون سلام قولا من رب رحيم وامتازوا اليوم أيها المجرمون ألم أعهد إليكم يا بني آدم ألا تعبدوا الشيطان إنه لكم عدو مبين وأن اعبدوني هذا صراط مستقيم ولقد أضل منكم جبلا كثيرا أفلم تكونوا تعقلون هذه جهنم التي كنتم توعدون اصلوها اليوم بما كنتم تكفرون اليوم نختم على أفواههم وتكلمنا أيديهم وتشهد أرجلهم بما كانوا يكسبون ولو نشاء لطمسنا على أعينهم فاستبقوا الصراط فأنى يبصرون ولو نشاء لمسخناهم على مكانتهم فما استطاعوا مضيا ولا يرجعون ومن نعمره ننكسه في الخلق أفلا يعقلون وما علمناه الشعر وما ينبغي له إن هو إلا ذكر وقرآن مبين لينذر من كان حيا ويحق القول على الكافرين أولم يروا أنا خلقنا لهم مما عملت أيدينا أنعاما فهم لها مالكون وذللناها لهم فمنها ركوبهم ومنها يأكلون ولهم فيها منافع ومشارب أفلا يشكرون واتخذوا من دون الله آلهة لعلهم ينصرون لا يستطيعون نصرهم وهم لهم جند محضرون فلا يحزنك قولهم إنا نعلم ما يسرون وما يعلنون أولم ير الإنسان أنا خلقناه من نطفة فإذا هو خصيم مبين وضرب لنا مثلا ونسي خلقه قال من يحيي العظام وهي رميم قل يحييها الذي أنشأها أول مرة وهو بكل خلق عليم الذي جعل لكم من الشجر الأخضر نارا فإذا أنتم منه توقدون أوليس الذي خلق السماوات والأرض بقادر على أن يخلق مثلهم بلى وهو الخلاق العليم إنما أمره إذا أراد شيئا أن يقول له كن فيكون. فسبحان الذي بيده ملكوت كل شيء وإليه ترجعون. صدق الله العلي العظيم. لأرواح أمواتنا وأمواتكم وأرواح الشهداء، رحم الله من قرأ الفاتحة.
Ahsant. Inshallah, next week we'll be having our program on Fridays starting at 7:30 p.m. with Salat al-Isha. We'll be sending out an announcement very soon on the announcement group chat and on our Instagram page, inshallah. Sallu ala Muhammadin wa ali Muhammad.
Brothers and sisters, inshallah, we'll end with ziyarah. السلام عليك يا رسول الله. السلام عليك يا أمير المؤمنين. السلام عليك يا فاطمة الزهراء سيدة نساء العالمين. السلام عليك يا حسن المجتبى. السلام عليك يا أبا عبد الله الحسين، وعلى الأرواح التي حلت بفنائك. عليك مني سلام الله أبدا ما بقيت وبقي الليل والنهار، ولا جعله الله آخر العهد مني لزيارتكم. السلام على الحسين وعلى علي بن الحسين وعلى أولاد الحسين وعلى أصحاب الحسين. السلام عليكم يا أئمة المسلمين وحماة المستضعفين، علي بن الحسين ومحمد بن علي وجعفر بن محمد وموسى بن جعفر وعلي بن موسى ومحمد بن علي وعلي بن محمد والحسن بن علي. الصلاة والسلام عليك يا صاحب العصر والزمان. الأمان 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 من فتن الزمان. السلام عليك يا شريك القرآن. السلام عليك يا كعبة الإيمان. السلام عليك يا إمام الإنس والجان. عجل الله تعالى فرجك وسهل الله تعالى مخرجك وظهورك، وجعلنا الله من أنصارك وعوانك والمستشهدين بين يديك والممهدين لسلطانك. والسلام عليكم يا أهل بيت النبوة جميعا ورحمة الله وبركاته.